In the darkest days of Nazi Germany, theologian Dietrich Bonhoeffer made a startling discovery while watching his educated nation embrace atrocity. From his prison cell, after years of resistance, he articulated an insight that challenges our basic understanding of human behavior. Stupidity, not evil, poses the greatest threat to civilization. This seems counterintuitive. We naturally assume that evil, deliberate malice, represents the ultimate danger to society. Yet Bonhoeffer observed something more insidious: the willing surrender of critical thought that enabled ordinary Germans to participate in extraordinary cruelties. This stupidity wasn't about low intelligence, but about moral surrender, the voluntary abandonment of independent thinking. Bonhoeffer's personal journey revealed why this matters. Despite reasoned arguments, moral appeals, and irrefutable evidence, he failed to awaken his countrymen to the horrors unfolding around them. His words couldn't penetrate the armor of stupidity that had enveloped otherwise intelligent people. This wasn't about intellectual capacity, but moral courage. What makes stupidity more dangerous than evil is precisely this distinction. Evil, at some level, recognizes itself as evil. It can potentially be reasoned with, exposed, or contained. But stupidity carries no such self-awareness. It wraps itself in righteousness and certainty. Facts bounce off it. Logical arguments dissolve against it. Moral appeals find no purchase. The stupid person becomes essentially unreachable through conventional means. This form of stupidity represents not an inability to think, but an unwillingness to think. It occurs when people abandon the moral courage required for independent thought, trading the discomfort of uncertainty for the comfort of conformity. Highly educated, intelligent people can become functionally stupid when they surrender their critical faculties for social acceptance, ideological comfort, or emotional security. The implications extend far beyond individual psychology. When societies collectively surrender critical thought, they create ideal conditions for authoritarian control. People don't merely tolerate cruelty, but actively participate in it, while maintaining their self-perception as decent citizens. This psychological mechanism transforms stupidity from a personal failing into a societal catastrophe. As we examine this societal stupidity more closely, we must confront an uncomfortable question. What makes otherwise intelligent humans surrender their capacity for independent thought? And how does this surrender transform ordinary people into unwitting agents of destruction? Section 1. The anatomy of societal stupidity. We must distinguish between intellectual limitations and moral stupidity to understand Bonhoeffer's insight. Intellectual limitations, simple ignorance or cognitive constraints, deserve compassion. Moral stupidity, however, represents a willful abdication of thinking in service of comfort or conformity. This explains why highly educated people can embrace demonstrably false beliefs or support unethical systems. Nazi doctors didn't lack understanding of medical ethics. They suspended that understanding. You've seen this paradox: the brilliant professor blind to ethical problems, the sophisticated thinker who abandons critical thought when discussing certain topics. This isn't intellectual deficiency, but moral surrender. The psychology of certainty creates a fortress around stupidity that facts cannot penetrate. When threatened by uncertainty, many minds snap shut, preferring any answer to no answer. The Nazi regime exploited this tendency masterfully, offering simplistic explanations for complex problems and clear enemies responsible for Germany's suffering. Today's political extremism, conspiracy theories, and fundamentalist movements similarly exploit this need for psychological comfort. They provide complete worldviews that explain everything, identify clear villains, and offer the security of absolute certainty. This certainty becomes self-reinforcing. Contradictory information is interpreted as confirmation rather than challenge. Scientists dismissed as corrupt actually strengthen science denial. Factual corrections experienced as persecution deepen ideological commitment. Stupidity's remarkable immunity to facts and logical argument emerges from sophisticated psychological defenses. They employ an arsenal of techniques: questioning sources rather than content, finding single exceptions to discredit patterns, shifting conversations to tangential issues, dismissing evidence as biased, or repeating talking points regardless of relevance. These aren't intellectual strategies, but psychological defense mechanisms protecting core certainties. Bonhoeffer's arguments didn't fail because they were illogical or poorly evidenced. They failed because his audience had developed systems specifically designed to neutralize threatening information. This explains why more facts and better arguments often fail. The barrier isn't intellectual but psychological, not a failure of information, but a system for information management that protects certain beliefs from scrutiny. The voluntary surrender of critical thinking represents not weakness, but psychological strategy. When reality becomes too complex or threatening to one's worldview, the mind employs a defensive mechanism. It stops thinking about what it cannot bear to consider. This choice rarely appears conscious, but emerges through subtle processes, gradually narrowing information sources, increasing identification with social groups, enjoying the emotional rewards of certainty. Through repetition, social reinforcement, and emotional manipulation, environments guide individuals towards surrendering their critical faculties. You've watched formerly nuanced thinkers adopt simplistic slogans, and reasonable colleagues become increasingly rigid in their views as this process unfolds. Modern manifestations have evolved beyond Bonhoeffer's time while maintaining the same psychological foundations. Social media algorithms create perfect environments for stupidity to flourish, spaces where challenging information never appears, and group identity reinforces intellectual surrender. These technology-enabled echo chambers intersect with tribal psychology to create digital tribes defined by shared beliefs. Historical examples beyond Nazi Germany, the Cambodian killing fields, Rwandan genocide, Chinese Cultural Revolution, show this pattern repeating across cultures. Even democracies show vulnerability when polarization creates conditions where tribal loyalty overwhelms factual reality. Early warning signs appear in seemingly innocuous developments, increasing hostility toward expertise, rising acceptance of falsehoods, growing intolerance for nuance, and elevation of loyalty over accuracy. Signals that reveal not just political division, but erosion of the capacity for shared reality upon which democratic governance depends. As we explore the mechanisms that transform individual surrender into mass stupidity, we'll discover how social and psychological forces combine to create environments where thinking itself becomes nearly impossible. Section 2. The mechanisms of mass stupidity. Social conformity creates the perfect conditions for stupidity to spread. Studies show that many people will deny what they can clearly see with their own eyes rather than disagree with a group. This isn't just weakness, it's built into our survival instincts. Throughout human history, being rejected by your group could mean death. Your brain still reacts to social disapproval as a serious threat. Bonhoeffer saw this enabling Nazi atrocities. Ordinary Germans looked away from obvious cruelty, not because they approved, but because standing apart was too frightening. This same pattern appears today in every setting where people remain silent despite knowing something is wrong. In workplace meetings, political discussions, and community groups. Fear drives people to surrender their thinking, not just fear of harm, but of being isolated. The process starts with small compromises, staying quiet when you disagree, nodding along with statements you know are false, laughing at jokes that contradict your values. Each compromise makes the next one easier, until thinking independently feels more threatening than following along. This happens internally too. You begin censoring your own thoughts before others can challenge them. Eventually, this self-censorship becomes so automatic that you believe you've formed your opinions independently, unaware of how completely fear has shaped your thinking. Authority figures use surprisingly similar techniques to promote stupidity across different movements and ideologies. They present themselves as special sources of truth that you can't get elsewhere. They systematically undermine other information sources, calling media corrupt, experts biased, and science politicized. This creates dependency where followers must return to the authority for guidance. These leaders introduce extreme ideas gradually, reward blind acceptance with belonging, and punish questioning with rejection. Most importantly, they convince followers that critical thinking is weakness and blind loyalty is strength. Once established, followers willingly embrace ideas they would have rejected earlier, believing they're showing courage rather than surrender. Simple explanations provide powerful psychological comfort in a complex world. Reality contains contradictions, uncertainties, and nuance that create mental discomfort. Simple narratives eliminate this discomfort by offering clear heroes and villains, straightforward causes and effects. These stories aren't just intellectually satisfying. They create bonds between believers, forming communities around shared explanations. This is why challenging someone's political narrative often feels like attacking their identity. You're not just questioning a belief, but threatening their sense of belonging. The more confusing and frightening the world becomes, the more attractive these simple explanations grow, transforming complex policy discussions into mythology, with good guys, bad guys, and easy solutions. Group identity overrides truth-seeking through powerful psychological rewards. Your brain craves belonging more than accuracy, an evolutionary priority hardwired into your thinking. When group membership requires certain beliefs, you'll adopt them surprisingly easily, especially when acceptance and rejection signals are clear. The rewards for conformity are immediate and powerful: validation, community, certainty, and purpose. Independent thinking offers none of these rewards. It often leads to rejection, doubt, and discomfort. This creates an unfair contest where belonging almost always defeats truth-seeking. Organizations reinforce this imbalance by rewarding agreement and punishing dissent, whether in religious groups, political parties, or workplaces. The relationship between power and stupidity works both ways. Power needs uncritical followers to maintain control, while those who surrender their thinking seek authorities to validate their beliefs. Given these powerful forces pushing us toward comfortable stupidity, how can we protect our ability to think clearly without giving up our human need for connection? Section 3. Reclaiming intellectual sovereignty. Protecting your ability to think clearly starts with daily mental habits that strengthen critical thinking like a muscle. Create a deliberate pause between hearing information and believing it. Even just a few seconds allows your rational mind to engage before emotions take over. Develop the habit of asking specific questions when you encounter claims. What evidence supports this? What would prove it wrong? Who benefits if I believe this? What might I be missing? These questions create resistance against appealing but unfounded ideas. Equally important is deliberately seeking information that challenges your existing views. Not fringe conspiracies, but thoughtful perspectives from different viewpoints. This practice protects against the gradual narrowing of thought that leads to stupidity. Perhaps most powerful is embracing uncertainty as a strength rather than weakness. Learn to say, "I don't know enough yet," or "I'm still thinking about that," instead of rushing to certainty. This mental flexibility is exactly what stupidity destroys. Building psychological resilience against social pressure requires both internal strength and external support. Start by clarifying what values matter enough to you that you'd risk disapproval to uphold them. Without this clarity, you'll inevitably drift toward whatever position offers acceptance in the moment. Practice small acts of principled disagreement in low-risk situations to build tolerance for the discomfort of standing apart. When someone makes an unfounded claim in casual conversation, ask gentle but clear questions rather than nodding along. These small actions build the resilience needed for more important stands later. Most importantly, develop a personal relationship with truth that exists independently of what others think. Recognize that aligning your beliefs with reality matters for its own sake. This provides an internal anchor when external pressures intensify. Finding even a single ally dramatically increases your ability to maintain independent thought under pressure. Bonhoeffer himself relied on a small circle of fellow resistors who validated his perception of reality when everyone else embraced delusion. Moral courage forms the foundation of resistance to stupidity. Yet our education and culture rarely develop this essential quality. The courage required isn't dramatic heroism, but a quiet willingness to accept discomfort for the sake of truth. You show this courage whenever you acknowledge complexity when others demand simplicity, express uncertainty when others require certainty, or question narratives that your social group treats as obviously true. This courage can be systematically developed through specific practices. Start by identifying your own forbidden thoughts, questions you immediately suppress out of fear or social conditioning. Simply acknowledging these thoughts, even privately, begins breaking the habit of self-censorship. Study examples of people who maintained integrity under extreme pressure, not just famous heroes, but ordinary individuals who refused to surrender their moral and intellectual independence despite serious consequences. These examples provide both inspiration and practical strategies for maintaining your own independence. Creating environments that support independent thought means recognizing how physical and social spaces influence thinking patterns. Traditional hierarchical structures, classrooms with rows facing an authority figure, or meetings where status determines whose ideas receive attention, subtly encourage intellectual surrender. Alternative arrangements that physically represent equality, circles rather than rows, collaborative spaces rather than podiums, help counter these influences. Beyond physical space, establish conversation norms that value exploration over conclusion, questions over answers, curiosity over certainty. Model these values by demonstrating comfort with phrases like, "I don't know," "Let's explore that further," or "I might be wrong about this." The most important environmental factor may be psychological safety, the shared understanding that honest questions and good faith disagreement won't result in rejection or ridicule. Creating this safety requires actively protecting those who question prevailing assumptions, especially when they hold less power in the group. Educational approaches that develop wisdom emphasize process over content, teaching not just facts, but methods for evaluating claims, recognizing patterns, and managing uncertainty. What if the most revolutionary act in today's world isn't speaking truth to power, but simply preserving your capacity to recognize truth at all?